The ESG Decoded podcast celebrates Women's History Month and recognizes the contributions and achievements made by women. ClimeCo, which powers this podcast, believes that supporting Women's History Month and International Women's Day aligns with its core values, particularly that of stewardship. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is integral to our culture, encouraging all employees to use their unique perspectives, experiences, and ideas to help advance business outcomes and foster a culture where everyone feels their viewpoint is valued. We embrace equity for women and endeavor to provide a platform to share best practices on how we can all contribute to gender equity. Enjoy this episode.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the ESG Decoded podcast. Today, I have David Latten, the head of Indirect Procurement from Logitech with me. David, hi. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me. A real privilege to be here with you today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to be talking with you today about gender equality and how we can promote it through our supply chain work. Hopefully, a lot of our listeners are familiar with Logitech. They might have a mouse, headphones, keyboard, something else. But in case, for those who aren't, will you tell our listeners a little bit about the company, first of all?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So Logitech, founded in 1981 in Switzerland. We're a Swiss-founded company in consumer electronics, as you say. Started very much in mice and keyboards, the kind of PC peripherals was the core market. That's still really strong today, but it's expanded a lot into really big growth markets today about video collaboration, webcams like we are today, and also meeting room setups. And also gaming is a huge growth area for Logitech nowadays. So really changed a lot in those 40 plus years. But what's been a constant is that Logitech is a very values-driven business, wants to make a positive impact in the world. And that's been true all of those years. And it certainly still has a big impact on my job today.
Let's start first. Tell us about what are the company values. I would love to understand how does it connect with the work you're doing on gender equality.
Sure. So the core value at Logitech is called equality and environment. What that really means is that we're going to have an impact. We're a multinational business making consumer electronics, $5 billion in revenue, thousands of employees across the globe. We're going to have an impact. We want to make sure we have a positive impact. That's our North Star for everything we do. We're determined to play a key role in creating a better future for our planet and society. It needs new ways of thinking. We want to make sure we don't create new problems in the process of doing that. Logitech is really actively looking at ways that we can do that. And that impacts everyone. I think everyone can have a role to do something. No one can do everything, but we can all do something. That's true for Logitech in terms of where we can impact. But it's certainly true for me as an employee of Logitech, but other employees too, about every role can have an impact. And I think it's really important that we all look at it through that lens. And ultimately, that's very rewarding, isn't it? Your work can really have that added meaning to your life if you are looking to positively impact the really big societal challenges for society. And Logitech values enable that. But I think all corporations can have a big impact there and need to be thinking in that way.
I love that message. I share that same message a lot of times when I'm speaking to young, college grads or, people who are about to graduate from a lot of times from where I graduated from, which is University of Texas at Austin, who are interested in working sustainability. And I think, like you said, every job can have an impact. It's just sometimes you have to find a creative way or a different way of achieving that. Logitech has one of the focus areas as you align with its values, as you mentioned, is equality. And so tell us a little bit more about gender fair procurement.
Sure. I'll double click on that a moment. Equality is a core value. Going back to that point about every corporation, every individual has a particular niche where they can really make an impact. If you think about equality and you think, who are Logitech? What do we do? Where can we really have that impact? And at our heart, really, we're a design company, we're an engineering company. STEM, really, if you dig into our DNA, it's STEM. We have huge expertise in STEM. That's the really intellectual property of Logitech. When you think of those topics, on the tip of everyone's tongue is gender. Gender in STEM has been an issue for many years. So that's a key area where I think Logitech can have a real kind of resonance and do some good. In addition to that, gaming, as I mentioned, gaming is a really big industry for us. It's one of our big revenue areas. Gaming, again, has gender issues. So I think Logitech as a company, if we really stick our hand up and say we want to address gender in our industry, in our workforce, in our products, there's a huge resonance to that. It's also one of the easier topics that people can kind of understand on a global basis. Diversity, inclusion, and equality has different meanings in many different countries. I think gender is kind of one of the few that people really get globally. So gender is important to Logitech. I think let's get that far, that the niche that Logitech can really have a resonance in. So what does that mean for me in procurement? I think I have a huge role to deliver forward on equality. When you think about equality, what you do externally, and procurement ultimately is an external facing role. We're at a pivot point between the internal challenges and strategies and potential external solutions. We govern the rules, the process, the relationships that organizations spend with their external suppliers. That's many billions of corporate dollars. With those corporate dollars become a responsibility to really push forward these values, but also an influence. And I think that's the sort of role where I and my team exist. The first thing we did there really is what a lot of companies do. We look to drive forward our supplier diversity, and looking to grow our diverse supplier relationships, minority-owned, women-owned businesses, looking to do that. And we're very passionate about that. But if equality is our core value, if you think about it in simple terms, every supplier ideally would be sharing that value, reflecting that value, and progressing forward that value. As powerful as supplier diversity is, it can't do that alone. I think when you look at our supply base, similar to other international companies, we spend a lot with other large tech players. We spend a lot with other large companies in other different industries. What can we do to live our value, to support that niche? Like we said, the Logitech has a resonance in gender. What can we do with our large suppliers? And I think the answer to that is the Gender Fair Procurement Initiative that we launched towards the end of last year.
I think there's been the interest in how we can use procurement in our supply chains to improve our impacts, whether they're social or environmental. I think we're seeing the trend definitely on the E side, where clients, a few years ago, I would say the loudest stakeholder kind of in the room were investors. Now they're still equally as loud, but there's another voice, and that's the customers, the buyers, their goods and services, the corporate buyers and their goods and services, asking them more questions. I think this is such a relevant topic for many reasons, but also I feel like a lot of our, I think a lot of B2B customers are thinking about, one, how do I respond and meet the expectations of my customers, but also how do I use my supply chain to influence as well?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right, Amanda, and that is exactly where Gender Fair started. Gender Fair are our co-founding partner in the coalition, and they started looking to influence consumer behavior. That was where they started. They assessed a number of really well-known, very large consumer-focused organizations, according to some metrics they developed based on the UN Women Empowerment Principles. It's live on their website. Anyone can go and look on their website about which of these really well-known consumer-focused organizations are gender fair. And ultimately why they're doing that, of course, they're looking to leverage the power of consumer dollars to support the companies that are gender fair, which in turn, the obvious impact would be, one hopes, that you then, companies that aren't gender fair, creates that race to the top. They need to become gender fair to get support. That's exactly the kind of simple principle behind what we're trying to do in corporate procurement. And there's a couple of advantages about corporate procurement. I think that we absolutely have an influence, the same as any consumer does, but corporate procurement is very concentrated. Logitech are not a big multinational by any stretch. We are a multinational, we're a well-known brand, but there are many bigger companies out there. But if you have 10, 15, 20 corporate allies that are asking of their suppliers, they have that influence that comes from their dollars of spend, as I say, which in some cases can be millions of dollars. There's a huge influence there to inspire some of these large B2B focused companies to move on gender equality. And I think that's really powerful because you need large companies to make a move on this. Back to my point around supplier diversity, a lot of diverse suppliers tend to be SMEs potentially. We need large companies, really well-known names, to move on gender equality too, and corporate procurement can have that influence to do that. And then these large companies that employ millions of people across the globe, have trillions of dollars of revenue, if they really start to make a move towards some of these goals, that's how society can reap some ambitious 2030 goals. Because, 2030 has been spoken about for a while. It's not that far away anymore. And certainly around equality, and I'm sure in other areas too, we need to make some dramatic action to hit some of these goals. And that ultimately is what we're trying to do.
Tell us a little bit more about the gender fair procurement kind of coalition. What are you asking your vendors or suppliers to do?
Sure, a great question. And I think it started with a few simple thoughts. I think it has to be really scalable and easy to do. I think we don't want this to be sort of another thing that suppliers will look at. But I do understand that the suppliers get asked many different things from many different companies. So it has to be nice and quick and scalable and easy for them to do. It has to be based around a credible framework. The gender fair assessment is based on the UN Women Empowerment Principles framework. So it's a really, really credible metrics that we're asking them. And essentially it's doing, as I said, it's using our influence that comes from corporate procurement. When we spend millions of dollars with a supplier, they will listen to us, they will pick up the phone to us. And the conversation goes something along the lines of, equality is a core value of ours. It's very important to us that we're looking to develop that value, but it's equally important to us that core partners are looking to develop progress towards that value. We believe that supplier relationships, like any other relationship, should be based on a sort of sharing of values. So that's what we're looking to do. We go to these key suppliers and we ask them to take the assessment. It's a very quick assessment. It only takes about 45 minutes to take, 18 questions, touching topics such as women in leadership representation, are your policies and procedures gender fair, is your advertising breaking sort of stereotypes and biases, and a few other areas. Really quick to take. We ask suppliers to take that each year. And all we ask really is that they do the assessment each year and put in place a plan to improve each year. I think progress really is the key thing for us here. We're not looking to use it as a stick. We're using to sort of unlock the influence from that sort of a buyer-seller relationship. That's what we're usually looking to. Procurement has done that for years. It's kind of the bedrock of procurement, that you use it to negotiate pricing, performance, manage risk, etc. All we're really saying to everyone is, make sure that you use your influence to really drive suppliers towards these really important social goals for society. But more than that, I think some progressive companies do that already, and that's fantastic. But what you find is 10 different companies will ask 10 different things. We're saying there's a couple of ways that we can really change the paradigm here. One is that we all ask the same questions, a nice simple assessment about, are you living up to the UN Women Empowerment Principles? And secondly, it's a aspirational target. Most companies aren't living up to the UN Women Empowerment Principles today. We need aspirational targets to get to our 2030 goals. I think certainly inequality today and ethical questionnaires, etc., really important questions are asked about child labor, human rights, and various other things in the supply chain. That's really important, don't get me wrong, and we want to make sure that none of that is happening in our supply base. That's a floor below which we don't want anyone to go below. But here's the thing, we're not going to reach our ambitious goals of society by making sure no one goes below a floor. We need to reach those goals of society by making sure companies are aspiring to get to these kind of ceiling level assessments, if you will, a kind of net zero idea of gender equality. When are you going to be net zero for gender, or some similar context around, we all need to strive towards that goal. And we want it to become industry standard that we ask those questions. That ultimately is what we're trying to do.
I like that concept of, there's some things where it's the floor. There is a minimum threshold that you must meet in order to be a vendor or supplier. And then what else can we do to keep developing our supply chain? Once that let's say everyone's met that minimum floor, what can we do to kind of push the progress along? How hard of a sell was this to leadership?
It wasn't at all, I suppose, is the short answer to that. I think, as I said at the top of our chat today, Amanda, it's a core value of ours. We really take that responsibility seriously. But here's the thing, it shouldn't be a hard sell for any corporation to want to drive this forward. I think there's lots of research out there. I think McKinsey have done some research in the last year or two around the performance of companies. There's a very clear and obvious research that shows that the performance will improve when you have diverse boards, more women on your boards. So I think it makes absolute business sense. Again, there's some research around the global GDP growth opportunity. If we get more women empowerment at work and higher representation at senior levels, that there's a huge global GDP growth opportunity out there, up sort of double for, I think it's above $10 trillion is the research suggestion. If we make a really strong move towards women's representation at work and in leadership positions, there's a huge GDP upside. All of that is incredibly strong business reasons to do it now. But I think even longer term than that, you mentioned earlier on about the customers. I think a really inspiring thing that's happening with Gen Z entering the workforce, millennials are now moving into management and leadership roles. Those two generations really do care what corporations are like. They don't want to work for companies unless they are looking to solve some of these challenges. So there's a talent question around, do you want the best talent from that generation? And ultimately, they're consumers too. So I think it's really exciting that we're at a stage now that there's lots of immediate research about it makes smart business sense to do this. But also long term, I think it's great, the generational shift. You will not be a sustainable business long term unless you are seen as an ally of these causes. So I think it's inspiring that we're at this position now in 2023, that I think we need that exponential progress to hit some of these targets, but it feels like maybe the dial is shifting that we can do that. And the new generations entering the workforce need a lot of plaudits for really making that shift, I think.
I love that. I love that it's not just, it's one way that we can start moving our supply chain. But I think back to what you were saying initially, we can all have an impact in our jobs, even if sustainability is not, directly in the title of our jobs. And knowing that you can work in procurement and have this positive impact in society and make progress, I think, and using that to attract, the best talent out there, retain them as well. I think it's another really good point. I mean,
Absolutely.
It's a war for talent.
Yeah, it's a war for talent. I think all companies to succeed need to be on the right side of that. That certainly involves being an ally for some of these really important causes. And then on the flip side, like you say, if you do that, imagine how engaged your employees can be. To talk about, we spend a lot of our time working. I hope that everyone enjoys their job as much as I do. I think if you feel that you can really impact these causes and your organization is empowering you to do that, how exciting is that? I'd hope everyone would jump out of bed in the morning to really drive that. And like you say, it may not be entirely obvious at first, but if you really think about your role, where you are in your organization, and also every organization, some will have far bigger impact in some areas than I can in my role, or Logitech can in their sector. But I think truly everyone can have an impact, as you said. And if we all can do that and we can all do something, then we can really make a difference. And also on an individual level, I really hope that you'd get huge enrichment in your role for doing that too.
I'll share a little personal story. So I started out in procurement as well. And as a lead purchaser, of course, like you mentioned, it was pricing, availability, quality, quantity, all that good stuff. But also on my responsibility was sustainability at our suppliers. And so after growing my kind of core category, about maybe 7 years into it, I was like, what I love the most about what I do is the sustainability part, helping to source, for example, certified wood products, helping to make sure that my suppliers that I'm contracting with are adhering to our code of conduct. I was working on improvement projects. We work very closely with our suppliers. So that kind of set me off on a trajectory, honestly, of sustainability, understanding how we could use our influence and how a job that didn't have sustainability in its title, which is one of my one of the things in my job description, how I could make an impact, and kind of really set me off. So I personally very much resonate. I understand what you're saying here, because that's what set me off on this path for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah. And if you follow that, that feeling you have about what you really enjoy in your role, if you follow that and look to expand that as much as you can, it feels like you're not even working a day in your life when you're doing that. You're just enjoying it. And if you're enjoying it, then you're bound to be doing a great job and making a great impact too.
David, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing more about Logitech. I love how values driven it is, or how the values are embedded in the company, so that, like you said, this was a fairly easy sell to leadership, and to be able to, figure out how you could really use procurement to make a difference in the world. Of course, we'll link up in the show notes links to the Coalition for Gender Fair Procurement for Logitech, so people can read more if you're interested in learning more about how, if it's appropriate for your company, how you can be part of the coalition as well. David, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Amanda. Real pleasure. Appreciate the time, and great talking to you today.